Bona tarda a tothom. Espero que hagueu tingut temps de digerir tota la informació rebuda aquest dematí, ja que imagino que el dinar no heu tingut gaire temps de digerir-lo a hores d'ara. Aquest matí hem tingut l'oportunitat de reunir experts que ens han parlat dels orígens, les tendències i les perspectives del NewSpace. Hem tingut l'oportunitat de saber més sobre l'estratègia catalana i de les perspectives internacionals de llançaments, però, com hem comentat, el NewSpace es basa sobretot en idees, en innovació, i és una terra plena d'oportunitats, ideal per als emprenedors. Però les bones idees han d'anar acompanyades d'oportunitats per materialitzar-se i estratègies de lideratge, que és del que parlarem aquesta tarda. Així doncs, la següent taula rodona es parlarà d'oportunitats de finançament pel sector espacial, instruments públics i instruments privats. Una taula rodona moderada per un referent del sector espacial europeu i una de les persones que, sense dubte, han fet més pel sector espacial català, en Juan Dalmau, expresident de la International Space University i durant molts anys cap de l'Oficina de Comunicacions de STEC-IESAC. Endavant, Juan, i moltes gràcies.
Is that okay? Bona tarda, good afternoon. It's difficult to see the audience from here, so if we do like this from time to time, you will know why.
Get used to it.
Thank you very much to the hosts and the sponsors for the opportunity to spend 45 minutes with you all and to inaugurate this afternoon that we understand is devoted to entrepreneurship. Our task is to discuss and find out whether we all agree, especially you four, the experts in space funding, public and private. You will talk about different instruments, your own experience, and this panel will be followed by another one on space entrepreneurship, more specifically, but please allow us to also talk about entrepreneurship, because this is all very linked. And if you allow me just one word of introduction. When we talk about space funding, we mean that companies, to survive and to strive, they need customers. And customers are probably the best source of funding. So we might mention customers on and off, even if the main topic of our discussion is public and private instruments for NewSpace funding. Let me just say that my role is one of a journalist, so I will start by introducing the experts sitting at my left. My name is Juan de Dalmau, and I appreciate the introduction by Mireia Colina. Thank you very much. Let me start with María Granero, who works for Airbus. Maria, thank you for coming from Munich. I'm not sure if you got up very early this morning or if you came very late last night, but you are the head of Defense and Space Engineering Services. And those of you familiar with Airbus, you know what that means. A large European group that relies on external talent to work on-site, hand in hand with your employees. And your modest budget, if I'm not mistaken, Maria, is of 300 million euro per year. That's modest. Some space agencies and some space offices would love to have this budget. Thank you for being with us. Obviously, you have studied business, but you studied first chemistry engineering at the Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya. And then you went on to business administration in France, and you have been at the top business schools in France and in Spain. And then you went to industry, of course. You've been commercial manager, marketing manager, and now you're head of space engineering procurement. You will tell us more about your job, Maria. But let me just ask you a very, very brief question. Why did you accept to come to Barcelona today?
Well, in fact, believe me, I think it's the first time in 25 years that I am living in Munich, in Germany, sadly.
25 years in Germany?
Yes, I have been living more time now in Germany than in Spain, but it's the first time that I can say I'm coming back to Barcelona for business and not for private purposes.
Okay.
Really, it's the first time.
First time you come
not my holidays
for
normally,
business.
and some of the colleagues here can confirm it. I was using my holidays to meet my suppliers, to meet other stakeholders.
Well, we would like to see you more often here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Now, to your right, Maria, we have José Achache, who has also come from Switzerland. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But your roots are in France, most of your roots, is that correct?
Yes, well, actually, could go back to Ukraine if you really digging, but...
Okay, well, that's interesting. We need another panel for to learn more. But what is interesting about José, and please correct me, is that you have worked in research, you have worked for different space agencies, and now you are in private industry. And one of your specialities is public-private partnerships, which I think is very interesting for our discussion today. Your background is in physics, geophysics. You studied at top universities in France and in the United States. And it seems to me, just looking at your education, that you love planet Earth. That's what you did in your research.
Actually, I started as a geophysicist studying the Earth. I'm one of those which didn't dream of being an astronaut when they were kids, and I came to space because I needed space to look at the planet. I discovered satellites, and after an academic career, I had another one with agencies, and finally I'm with the private sector, which is where all the action is.
So let's talk about the private sector. I think you are modest, because when people ask you, in how many startups are you involved, you usually say 4. But then when we pull your tongue, you mention 6. And this morning I heard 9. Are these all really startups, José?
No. Actually, one is a startup that I founded 30 years ago. But it was a startup when I founded it. But in space, because many of them are not in space, but they're all startups. In space, I'm actually involved in the whole value chain, except launchers. And since this morning, I know why. When I listened to the panel on launchers, I mean, there was such a brilliant panel that I'm glad I'm not there. The competition would be too harsh. But we're building, with Astrocast, we're building a whole constellation for IoT. With Medialario, we are building instruments, optical instruments for satellites. With Altyn and Photon, we're processing data. And with Rio 20, we are analyzing, we're doing downstream services in flood modeling and insurance. And the sixth one is SciSec, which is providing cybersecurity to the whole system, because it's the last layer which is needed.
Cybersecurity, that's an interesting word. And in fact,
critical.
We have seen on Maria's CV that she has also been in charge of cybersecurity, so we might come back to that. But to your left, Maria, we have Martin Rusnak. You came all the way, may I say, from Slovakia, from your roots?
Yeah, you can say that. Not today, but I came all the way
yes,
from Slovakia.
So Slovakia is where your roots are, and your work is in Prague, not far from Slovakia. Thank you very much to you and to the European Union Agency for the Space Program, EUSPA, for being with us. You studied physics. Did you know that, José?
Physics seems to be I didn't know before this morning, but now I know.
Good thing to study. And also then you went on to study international politics and diplomacy. What I find interesting is that you are a startup founder yourself. Is that correct? Can you tell us one word about your company?
Yeah, so it's a consulting company focusing on space and advising other space startups on how to success.
Thank you. I think we can use your startup services because NewSpace is using them, correct? So you are coming here to Barcelona for what reason, if I may ask?
Yeah, to see the beautiful city and to speak about all the opportunities that USPA provides for startups and space ecosystem as such, and to convince you to take part and benefit from some of the opportunities.
Well, we have a lot of questions for you, and I'm sure in the audience too. Thank you, Martin, for coming here. And to your left, we have someone who knows about investing money in companies, especially new companies. His name is Borja Ballesté. You studied, Borja, business administration in top school here and another top school in Italy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And why do you invest money in companies?
Well, I mean, I'm not investing my money, first of all.
Oh, because it's not your money, okay?
Because it's not my money. No, it's why am I working in this ecosystem is because I'm convinced that in order to improve society and to reach next level in many industries, you need people with great ambition, with great knowledge that they want to start something from scratch in order to change things and improve.
So since you are not investing your personal money, let me ask you the next question. And for that one, we would like to have the little slide, if someone can please show it. You work for others, they give you their money, and they trust you when you suggest, okay, this is a good company to invest. So what are the criteria you use when you assess a new company or a new project, depending on the phase in the lifetime of the company? Do you change the criteria?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure that during this discussion, a lot of criteria will be appearing. I would say that the first one is that what is being built has a really great potential in terms of market and in terms of differentiation. That knowing that what is being built is completely unique and different and is better than what is the state of the art of the technology. This is key because in the end, this kind of players, business angels, venture capital, what we are looking for is for great multiples, 10x our investment. So for a company to be able to grow this much, they need to have something unique. And obviously, this something unique depends on the market, depends on the team, depends on a lot of stuff. But the first thing that I ask myself when I see a project is this the best I can find? If the answer is yes, then I want to know more.
Right. So we're talking about a newborn company. And I'm sure that people here from Cámara de Comerç, they know what we're talking about because it has been their business for 700 years. As we heard this morning from Monica Roca, this place has hosted entrepreneurs for 700 years. And I'm sure some of them have been through the Valley of the Death. What can you tell us, Borja, about the Valley of the Death? Is that when you pull out the money from your company?
Definitely not.
This
is when you need to get more money from us.
Okay.
Basically, this Valley of the Death is when you start having your first clients, when you start to have everything in place to go to the next level, I would say. You need to have some metrics and some milestones achieved that should be outstanding in order to get the investors to keep believing in the project. At some point, obviously, it's always difficult to raise money, but at the first stages, you will be asked for past experience, you will be asked for the development of or the technology. That is something that normally founders, they know a lot of it. They know way more than us. But when you reach this point, investors will start asking questions about profitability,
yes.
about they will question the prices you have to tell them that your product is worth. And when they start questioning you financial aspects, then normally it's more difficult to justify them if you're not a top-tier project. And that's why a lot of companies get into this point. They are not profitability yet, so they cannot survive without external funding. And if they have not been able to prove their assumptions in 2, 3, 4 years, then you get this point that is key in order to
2,
success.
3, 4 years, sometimes more, right?
Sometimes more, obviously,
Yes.
and even more in space. I mean, myself, well, the kind of companies that we were investing in Bereti, they are all deep tech, so we know what it's like to wait until we have the first piece of revenue somehow. But when I talk about space companies, normally I compare them with the biotech. It's a sector that is
Comparable?
It's comparable,
Yeah.
and it's more mature in terms of private investment, and how project completes phases, and that's when they unlock more funding, is kind of similar.
Right.
I would say that I think here, well, I'm sure that here there is a co-founder of one of the companies we invested, and
Yes.
we did this work with them. It's okay. I think that you are like a biotech project.
So let's
Explain me when you are going to get a jump in valuation and why.
Let's talk about those companies who have made it, at least through the first phase. Then they need to find a good anchor customer, right? Someone who has the money to be a real customer. So my question now is to Maria, with your little budget. What are the new technologies and the new innovation that you look for? Because you know the supply chain very well, at least in Europe, I imagine.
Yes. So first, maybe I have to explain what I am exactly buying. So I'm buying engineering services,
Yes.
testing services, so the kind of testing that was mentioned before by Pangea, okay? And as well, all the R&D and innovation for the Defense and Space Division. Which are the competencies and technologies that we are looking in this scope now, and which are the ones for the future? Now, well, from the classical ones, the mechanical engineering, I would say, for instance, we outsource technical structure analysis for the Ariane 6, so 4 or 5 years ago with the colleagues in Madrid. So these are the classicals, and I will say these are even the easy ones, mechanical engineering. There are plenty of them in Europe. When it starts to get more complicated, it's because we are subcontracting a lot of system architecture, software development, and here starts to be more difficult because we are fighting in the market to get the resources from all our more attractive industries nowadays, like automotive, autonomous driving, and as well all the Google and co, I would say. So this is for us a big challenge to get the best talent, especially in the area of software development. Okay, we are as well subcontracting a lot of product security, cybersecurity, because it's key for the satellites, it's key for the space, and not only, it's for all of our platforms. You must understand that, as the name of the division says, we are doing civil, dual, and military products, okay? So therefore, we must secure that they are as well sovereign and national, all these aspects, independent from export control, ITAR, national securities of the company, so it's a quite complex one, okay?
Yes, I can see people are taking note of these fields because those are the promising ones. Can you repeat the keywords?
Yes.
Yes.
Export control,
Export
so
control.
ITAR and EAR, okay?
Yes.
But there is as well export control between national European countries, so
Yes.
you must take it in both directions. After that, in order that a company can start to work for us, if it is a military program or satellite even, in UK, for instance, we were having a UK representative. From the UK MOD, there is a X-Leaks, that is called, so the companies must be registered in this register. If not, you cannot start working with them.
Yeah.
So there are some constraints from the industry that you must follow in order to work appropriately. But coming back to your question, which technologies we are looking for? Because what I mentioned were the technologies we are working today. So in fact, the technologies, the competences that we are looking for tomorrow, and tomorrow is really tomorrow, are competencies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing. This is the reason why we were in contact with one of the stakeholders here in the city, with the Barcelona Supercomputer Center. We are looking as well for other technologies and know-how like 3D printing in space. Okay?
3D printing in space.
3D printing in space, and there I think that there is a lot of room for improvement, I would say, because I remember very well 6-7 years ago, we were looking for a company to with flight heritage who had 3D printed in space, and there was only one in the world. Now it's good because thanks to this experience, now there is a European company with ESA support who had this experience. But this is very important for the future, 3D printing in Spain, in the space. And the technology...
Well, both. In Spain and in Spain.
Yes. And the technology is completely different. You need to take all the parameters into account. And the last point that I would like to mention is more... It could be a classical one, depending how you look with glasses from the industry, and this is Industry 4.0. So what I mean with is the automatization of the production systems. And this is for me very evident in automotive. I'm coming from automotive, so I started my career in SEAT and Martorell, so I know very well this world. And when you see there the robots working, this is the step where we need to go to the space. And at one moment before it was mentioned, we need to produce faster, quicker, more effective. And this is key, because in fact, today, if you go to the integration of the satellites, it's still very, very manual. So there is a lot of improvement, room for improvement. And at Airbus, what we are doing right now is first, we have an initiative, a project running since 3 years. It's called DDMS, Digital Design Manufacturing Services. So we want to, based on the 3D experience, automatize, digitalize the complete value chain, okay? In allowing us to include, to do everything more digital, including the manufacturing. So there, again, I know there are very good Catalan companies in this area because we work for Airbus Commercial. So there are some opportunities in space, I see.
Excellent. Well, I think that people are really listening carefully to you, because we do have in the audience several people and companies who started in automobile, and now are moving to space. So we have a great example with you and your company. A very quick one, if you give just one sentence to this question. In what countries are you procuring your services?
It's a good question. I have a team located in 5 countries. So
5 countries?
Yeah, the classical, so Spain, France, Germany, UK, but now recently, since 1 year, we have a team in Airbus Portugal, in Lisboa. So we have as well there as part of the team. So this is where the team is based, and we are trying to be close from the internal customers and the suppliers. And here maybe it's important to say, yes, most of my, I would say, 99% of my supply base is European.
Yes.
And this is different from my colleagues at Airbus Group and Airbus Commercial. For instance, engineering services, I have, as I mentioned before, a lot of constraints linked to geo-return imposed by ESA, as well of offset, because we are, this is as well a similar wording with a similar effect. You have restrictions to decide to which company you are working with and located in which country. Okay, so but my colleagues in Airbus Commercial, for engineering services, they are doing 1/3 of the engineering services in India. So if we are talking about doing the industry more effective, reducing costs, there are alternatives there. I will not propose for a space with all the constraints we have with the institutions to go to India, but I see as well there room for improvement, because we are currently located or centralized in certain European locations, and Europe is very broad. So there is room to do what I will call nearshoring, even for instance in the European countries that were promoted by the ESA, being new state members, and where in fact we have European constraints, and for the moment the industry is still very well developed.
Right, right. Well, thank you for teaching us this new word of nearshoring. Let me move on to another person without borders, José. I will not ask you too many questions about the Ukraine, but about other countries where you have experience. Let's go to the heart of our discussion now with funding schemes in the NewSpace ecosystem. José, you have worked in different European countries. What differences do you see in their respective ecosystems? Could you give us some examples?
Of course. I would, using your diagram would help. Seed money is easy to find anywhere. Investors put their own money, founders put their own money. You have incubators. Catalonia will have a big, there's a big in Switzerland, there are bigs almost everywhere, and there are plenty of incentives from regions and governments. Then there's business angels. There are probably more rich people in Switzerland than in France and other countries, so finding angel investors in Switzerland is easy, but that only funds the beginning. And then you have to go to VCs, to venture capital. And venture capital, they will look at the different parameters that were described. Personally, when I started, I was looking at the product, the market, and essentially these were the two things. Now, after a few years, I've changed my mind, and the first criteria for me is people. Because, with different people, with the same thing and different people, you do different things. So people, product, market. What problem are you solving with your system? And then you talk to VCs. VCs, they have a lot of qualities, they have some weaknesses. One of them, that's just a parenthesis, is that they only know two feelings, which is greed and fear. So they used to be greedy until last year, and now they fall into the fear mode, and that's the worst one. I prefer the greedy one than the fear one, because that stops everything. But more seriously, the one thing that venture capital hates is being alone. They don't want to be alone because they know that when they will have to dig into their pockets again, they want to be able to rely on other people. So they will try and find other partners, and this is where the European system is actually a bit weak. There's a tendency to say that there's less venture capital in Europe than in the US. That's wrong.
We have heard that.
That's wrong. There's just as much because venture capital is very mobile. And if there's a need in Europe, it will come to Europe. The only thing is, in the US, I haven't spoken about public grants, and since you were asking about the differences, there are countries like France where you get a lot of subsidies. When your company goes wrong, then venture won't help. Well, there are public grants, there's public support, very strong in France, somehow in Spain, I understand, fairly significant in Germany, totally absent in Switzerland. This is a Protestant attitude that public money is not going to go to private companies. If they're not able to survive on their own, too bad for them. But no help from the government to be expected at any moment. That's very short.
Most of your startups are based in Switzerland.
Yeah, we're suffering these days. We're really suffering. But back to, so grants are important, and providing this environment makes a big difference. But then one way for VCs not to be alone is to have anchor tenants. And this is what the Americans do very well and the Europeans are not doing. Anchor tenancy is essentially I, as a public entity, to be more specific, I, Department of Defense, as a public entity, will guarantee that I will buy you that much products over the next 10 years. So it's not a subsidy, it's just a promise that they will buy your product, which means that they have to accept it, they have to validate it. Once it's validated, and that makes the venture capitalists feeling much less alone, because they know that these anchor tenants will support the company together with them, and that makes a huge difference. There's a bad side to it, which is that That way, the Department of Defense will decide which company it supports and which one it does not support. I mean, I keep using with my students the fact that in 1995, we had seven to 10 search engines. Most of them, you would never heard of them. Alta Vista, Mr. Jeeves, maybe you heard about Yahoo because they've been doing something else. Only one survived, which is Google. It's been said that it's because they had a better search engine. The reality is that the Department of Defense decided that Google would be their search engine, and then it biases the market. But anyway, my point is that what we're missing in Europe is this anchor tendency, because that's absolutely critical. Because if you look at your diagram here, there's one thing missing in this diagram, which is the horizontal scale. And for a physicist, it's
how many years?
It's a big flow.
It may be intentional.
And it's how many
tell you
years.
why.
And the problem is that this, if you stretch the time frame, you will not move the boxes together with the red line. And this is exactly what's happening today. Most startups underestimate the time it takes to actually finalize the product and get to the market and start growing revenues. And today, if you're not in the new financial situation with VCs and even worse with private equity, if you're not generating revenues, you don't have to break even, but you have to be in the course of breaking even and generating significant revenues. But if you don't generate revenues, don't even talk to the VCs. Even with now the cost of capital has escalated from 30% to 80%, but even at 80%, they won't take you if you don't have revenues. So, and always, I mean, startups underestimate that it's not going to take 2 years to get there. It's going to take them 4 or 5 years, which widens your curve, and venture capital will stay where they are. So you will find the valley of death, which is when venture capital ends and you're not there yet with some revenues.
I must admit, Jose, that I will soon fall into the valley of death myself, unless the organizers can remove the graph, because I will have to start paying royalties to the author of this graph, Professor Walter Peters, who is in the audience, and who will speak tomorrow morning about space markets and space financing. And I'm sure Walter will have a word to say about the time scale, Monsieur le Physicien. Thank you, José. So please go back to the normal chart. And now, since you're talking about criteria used by investors, let's ask a similar question to the European Union Agency for the Space Program. Martin, we have understood that your role in USPA is to help investors. You have some programs for that, and also to help startups directly. So you're not in Switzerland.
No.
Can you tell us about both lines of action, please?
Yeah, I can, but also some of our activities are valid for Swiss companies. So, José, maybe you should listen how we can support you. So, yes, our department works both with startups and investors. And for the startups, we have a lot of supporting activities. There was a scheme started by European Commission called Cassini, which is a 7-year program that wants to invest and build strong space ecosystem in Europe. And we as EUSPA are implementing some activities from this program. And what we can do and what we do is that we support startups in their whole lifetime. So we start with hackathons. There will be actually one Cassini hackathon happening in Barcelona at the beginning of November, and it concerns finance and banking. So if you have some idea on how to use space data for banking and finance, you can come to this hackathon. And then we have competitions. In this competition, people can submit their ideas, prototypes, or products, and we give the money to the best ones to further work on their things. Then we also do a matchmaking event It's called Cassini Matchmaking. It has happened 3 times already this year, and next one is happening in November.
Matchmaking?
Matchmaking.
Yeah.
Matchmaking.
Okay.
So we invite startups, investors, and corporates as the clients, and we always put a thematic topic, and we put them together. There is also a Cassini investment fund that was launched this year, and actually there is 1 billion euros to be invested in space startups in the Europe, in the horizon of the next few years. So you can also, as startups, look for that. There are at the moment 4 VCs who are part of the Cassini investment fund. So, and they have this money to be put into space startups. So there are a lot of opportunities that we do to support startups and investors. And actually one more thing that we have for the investors, for them not to feel alone and to be the only ones. We did also capacity building workshops. Yes. Because we are a European Union agency for the space program, but we are focusing on the usage of the data, on bringing the data for the use on the applications we use in everyday life for example, agriculture, finance, healthcare, and all the other things. So we are explaining to the investors that what are the trends in these sectors and how space data is used in these sectors.
Let me make sure we heard you correctly, Martin. Did you say 1 billion euros for space startups?
Yes.
Does this mean that you use specific criteria to select the businesses because they are space, or do you use the same criteria across all sectors?
So this fund, this Cassini fund,
yes,
it's really focused on the space companies in Europe. So it's this activity is implemented by European Investment Fund. We as EUSPA are supporting in this. So in this one, we are not there with the selection of the startups because the VCs were selected and now they should select the best space startups. But where I can speak about the selection criteria is, for example, the competitions. I mentioned competition, so now we have one open. It's called My EU Space Competition. Actually, you can have a look. There is a deadline coming at the end of October for the ideas phase. And you can get 10,000 euros to work on your idea. And here we look not only for the technical expertise, which is what sometimes startups tend to think that we have amazing technical product and that it is, but we also look for what was said already here, that you need the customers and you need to go to the market and see on the market how is your idea, and you need to understand your customers. So these are the 2 main criteria we look at.
That makes a lot of sense. You look at the technical solution and you look at the market feasibility and the potential success in the market. Let me turn that question into something we would like to hear from Borja. I've been watching you, Borja, and you seem to agree with what has been said. You are nodding, but maybe there's something that has not been said.
Well, I mean, before starting the panel, Joseph said that he would say things that I wouldn't like of VC. But to be honest, I pretty much agreed on what he said. One of the things that we really fear is to have a portfolio company who runs out of money, who is not ready yet to be invested by a fund that invests in the next stage, and having to support them all on our own. I think that regarding public funding, what I've been seeing in Spain, France, and even in Europe is that they are doing this anchor investment pretty well. I would say, at least in Spain, it's working pretty well with EDI. In Iberia, we have a lot of portfolio companies in space that we have co-invested with them. Basically, what they do is they co-invest the same amount of money that you invested. Well, not the same, but 90%, and they will follow up with you every time that you invest on them. So this is super nice because in the end, you take less risk of getting your company, I don't know in English, how to say it in English, but in the sea right next to the land, you know, dying there. So there are really instruments for this. It's working well. I think that space is one of the sectors that have more public funding support compared to other technologies. There is even though it's a sector that is privatizing a lot, there is still a lot of support from public entities, obviously with a lot of interest, geopolitical interest. This is something that in space will always be there, but the money is there. And I would say that they have to use it in 3 ways. The first one is the co-investment. This is, I think, is working pretty well.
Co-investment, yeah.
Co-investment is working pretty well, I would say. Second one is with helping the companies to get their first client. It can be the public institution. This is basically what you said. And I think this is something super interesting, super useful, and that needs to be done. We have a lot of portfolio companies that they get their first client from public agencies. It's not like grants, they become your first client. This is nice.
Yes.
And the third one, that maybe is the one that is working a bit worse, is when they build these big programs to really fund a key initiative from the European Union, from the Spanish government, whatever, and they allocate a lot of money. And this money normally doesn't end up in hands of the startups, but in big corporations that the government thinks that they will use it with investing, like not investing, but contracting startups.
Yes.
This doesn't always happen. And I'm talking, I don't want to say names, but maybe for budget that you have 10, 15, 20 millions for 2 projects, and they give it always to the same people. And this, the only thing that I think they should improve, and governments and institutions should be more brave to place it in the right startups with the right teams in order to really help them make a difference.
Yeah, let's not say names of companies, but let me ask you the next question to Airbus, to Maria, if you allow me. What criteria, Maria, do you use at Airbus to select a new supplier, a small one? Do you select small ones? And once you select them, how do you work with them?
So in fact, we have 2 ways of working, and this is exactly one is for the big suppliers, and another for the smaller. It's clear. The criteria are the classical, I would say, are the commercial, contractual, technical capabilities, quality, and maybe to mention it, sustainability. So in fact, this is something really new. It appeared now. Since 1 month now, we require to send to all the suppliers a sustainability questionnaire to be taken into consideration. So this is common for both. What is the difference? What is clear is that for weak companies, we expect them as well to be supporting us in risk and opportunity, I will say. So there we are talking about strategic suppliers. Our objective is to work with a reduced number of companies complying with all our constraints in the business and industry, And then the contracts are very heavy in there. We have another way of working, and it is exactly what you are asking. When we are talking about innovation, we are an R&D. We are talking more about startups, research centers. Yes. So here we allow ourselves first to do what we call proof of concepts. So if we are convinced that the company or had a special technology or is something we want to test, we are allowed even to go outside of the classical procurement process with a call for tender because we want to test it.
So you can go, in some cases, you can go direct negotiation without a call for tender.
Exactly, correct. But we must control it, if not, it's a chaos.
Right.
So for very concrete cases, and in this case, we have a more light contractual documents, And this is the way we apply for startups. So in fact, I was mentioning one concrete case. So it's not a space, it's connected, but we applied this way of working for the Future Combat Aircraft System, for the FCAS program, where in fact the German government gave us a dedicated amount that we didn't keep it by ourselves. It was a clear mission to allocate it to 15 startups in Germany, and we put the money in order to test these concrete technologies. So this is something that we are doing it hand in hand with the customers.
Just one caveat on this. The time of this company is not the same as the time of a startup. And as well as we welcome this kind of partnerships with prime contractors like Thales, Airbus, and the others, it's not the magic solution, because it takes almost as long as with a public agency to actually conclude a contract with when it's a long-term procurement contract with Airbus.
So
and also that, I mean, co-investment is not anchor tenancy. Co-investment is fine, that there's someone accompanying the venture and helping if there are public funding or EIB, IC helping, but it's not as sane, because it's not as healthy as an anchor tenant, because it keeps you, anchor tenant will keep you product and service and customer oriented.
Yes, well, I saw Monica Roca taking note earlier on when, who was it? Someone explained the term anchor tenant. Was that?
That was me.
It was him.
You?
Yeah.
Yes. So we believe that's one of the messages of this discussion, a concept that was invented in the US, but we could use here more, especially coming from administrations. The administration could be the first or the biggest customer of a startup. We have to slowly come to conclusions, so I will ask each of you, what are you taking home? Let's start with Martin. Any message you will bring back to Prague?
Yeah, we will look at this anchor financing. It sounds as an interesting concept, so I will bring back that let's have a look on this, whether we can implement it into the support we do. And the second message, second is that we need to keep working with the investors to not let them be alone. And the third message is that we should promote more our activities, because, for example, in Switzerland, that you know that is happening, and also we heard about the new countries in Europe. So also to look on promotion of our activities over there.
Thank you. We have other conclusions. For example, what would you say to the local and regional administrations that they could do to help the ecosystem grow? For example, how could they be helped to go to the US?
Well, honestly, I wouldn't ask them to do that. I mean, facilitating the regulations and the regulatory aspect is always important, and facilitating this is fine. I guess we've said, from the financing perspective, we've said it all. So whatever Catalonia can do for its startup along the lines that we've described is fine. If I were to add one thing, I would go back to my initial remark as how you select a good company is with people. And I think the one thing you would expect from a local government or national government to create a solid ecosystem is training. Good universities, good training to get good engineers. One of the most difficult things we have today is we're facing most of the high-tech companies is hiring. Hiring is extremely difficult. Finding qualified people in AI is almost impossible, and in many different domains. That's what Maria was explaining. So having good training facilities, good universities, you don't build that overnight, but and good conditions to make sure that you can keep the best engineers with you. This is one thing we have in Switzerland with EPFL and ETH. We have fantastic engineers, and that's one of the strengths of the Swiss startups. But it's really, really important. That would be my main recommendation to the local government.
Training and keeping talent. Maria?
I share your point of view, and I will say even that we are now in a crossroad, and it's exactly the good moment to build all these engineers that we will need. Because I see a bottleneck in 2 to 3 years, because there are a lot of new programs coming. Many European governments had promise to develop and invest in a lot of defense and space programs. So if all of them come at the same time, simply like this, there is not enough engineers in Europe, and I mean Spain, France, Germany, that are normally the core countries, enough to put in place all these programs at the same time. Because for many programs we have as well restrictions on nationalities. Okay, we must not forget. So simply like this, it's the right moment to start investing now in the new generation of engineers that we will need.
Well, I think that our time is over, but I have
we're being fired.
An incredibly short question
With jettisons.
each of you, just with one number. When are you leaving from this conference? How long are you staying? Borja?
I will leave at 5.
5 today?
Yep.
How about tomorrow?
Difficult.
Okay. Martin?
Tomorrow morning at 7 is my flight.
7, okay. Maria?
At the same time, close at the airport.
Jose?
Obviously, I'm the only one who has nothing else to do, so I'm here. I'm here until the end of the conference.
Wow. Well, let's give them all a very loud applause. Thank you.